The moment I stepped into my vacation home after 3 months away, something felt wrong. The familiar floral wallpaper my grandmother had chosen was gone, replaced by gaudy geometric patterns. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Jenna. $3,000 for the wallpaper upgrade. You are welcome. I called her immediately, my hands shaking. I am living in this house, so I replaced it because it was ugly, she laughed. Your taste is outdated. That is when I remembered the security cameras I had installed last year. Sometimes justice requires evidence. The Lake Tahoe vacation home had been in our family for generations. When my grandmother passed away 5 years ago, she left it to me in her will. The little frame cabin sat nestled among towering pines, its large windows offering a perfect view of the crystal clear lake below. It was my sanctuary, my escape from the pressures of my marketing job in San Francisco. I had always adored the delicate floral wallpaper my grandmother had chosen for the main living area. It featured tiny blue forget-me knots against a cream background, a pattern she had carefully selected because the flowers reminded her of childhood summers spent at the lake with her own mother. Every time I saw that wallpaper, I felt connected to her. I cannot believe you did this, I said to Jenna over the phone, walking around the living room, my free hand tracing the new geometric pattern of interlocking hexagons in harsh navy and mustard yellow. You know how much that wallpaper meant to me. Oh, please, Karina, Jenna scoffed. It was ancient and starting to peel. This place needed updating. You should be thanking me for improving your property value. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. 6 months ago, Jenna had called me in tears after finalizing her divorce from Scott. She had lost her job as a dental receptionist around the same time, and with no income and nowhere to go, she was desperate. Despite our historically strained relationship, I had offered her the vacation home as temporary lodging while she got back on her feet. We agreed you could stay here for a few months while you looked for a job and an apartment, I reminded her, my voice tight. We never discussed you making changes to the property. This is still my house, Jenna. Well, if I am going to live somewhere, I need it to be livable, she replied, her tone suddenly defensive. Besides, I have already been here for 4 months, and it felt like home. I figured you would understand. I walked into the kitchen and noticed more changes. The vintage blue canisters that had been on the counter were gone, replaced with modern glass containers. The handmade quilted wall hanging from our great-aunt was missing entirely. Where are Grandma's kitchen canisters? And Aunt Betty's quilt? I asked, alarm rising in my voice. Those old things? I put them in boxes in the garage. They were collecting dust and looked so outdated with the new decor. You had no right, I said, feeling my hands begin to shake again. These are my things, Jenna. This is my house. You always were so possessive, she sneered. It is not like you use this place much anyway. You are too busy with your fancy job and fancy friends in the city. I was about to respond when I heard laughter in the background. Do you have someone there with you? I asked. There was a pause. Just a few friends over for drinks. No big deal. Friends? Jenna, I never said you could have parties at my house. It is not a party. It is a small get-together. Anyway, about that wallpaper bill. When can you pay me back? The contractor is waiting. I felt like I had entered some bizarre alternate reality. I am not paying for wallpaper I never asked for or wanted. Fine, Jenna sighed dramatically. I guess I will just have to cover it myself, even though I am basically broke. Just another example of how you never help me when I really need it. After hanging up, I sat down on the sofa, feeling numb. Something prompted me to open Instagram, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There was Jenna, posting photos of her lake house with hashtags like homeowner and lakefront living. The most recent post showed her with a group of people I did not recognize, all holding wine glasses on my deck with a caption reading, "Hosting my first dinner party in my new place. So blessed." She was presenting my house as her own property. This was not just about wallpaper or decor changes. This was about Jenna completely overstepping boundaries and essentially taking over my property. As I scrolled through her social media, I discovered dozens of photos from parties she had hosted over the past months. In one video clip, I could hear her clearly telling someone, "Yes, I finally have a place of my own. My grandmother left it to me. The blatant lie hit me like a physical blow. That was the moment I realized this situation went far beyond sibling rivalry or temporary imposition. Jenna was systematically taking over my property and creating a narrative that it belonged to her. I walked back through the living room, really seeing the extent of the changes now. The furniture had been rearranged. My bookshelves had been emptied of my books and filled with decorative objects I did not recognize, and there were unfamiliar jackets and shoes by the door, suggesting people had been staying over. Just then, my phone buzzed with another text from Jenna. "By the way, I invited some friends to stay for the weekend. Hope that is okay. Not like you were using the place anyway." I sat down on the unfamiliar ottoman that had replaced my favorite reading chair, and for the first time since entering my vacation home, I let the tears come. This was not just about wallpaper. This was a complete violation of trust, boundaries, and respect. And somehow, I knew this was just the beginning. The drive from San Francisco to Lake Tahoe normally filled me with anticipation and joy. The gradual climb into the mountains, watching the landscape transform from urban sprawl to towering forests, usually calmed my mind and lifted my spirits. But today, every mile increased my anxiety. I gripped the steering wheel tightly as memories of childhood summers with Jenna flooded back. Despite being only 2 years apart, we had always been opposites. While I was cautious and responsible, Jenna was impulsive and charming. She could talk her way out of trouble with a smile that made our parents forget whatever rules she had broken. I envied that ease, that ability to navigate life without constantly calculating consequences. "Maybe I am overreacting," I said aloud to myself as I wound through the mountain roads. "Maybe we can work this out." It was nearly 8 in the evening when I pulled into the gravel driveway of my cabin. The windows glowed with warm light, and I could hear music and laughter spilling out into the quiet night. I counted 6 unfamiliar cars parked haphazardly around the property. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of my car and approached the front door. I hesitated, then realized how absurd it was that I felt like a stranger at my own home. I used my key and walked in. The scene that greeted me was surreal. At least 15 people filled my living room, drinks in hand, lounging on furniture I did not recognize. A makeshift bar had been set up on my grandmother's antique sideboard, bottles lined up precariously close to the edge. Conversations halted as I entered, curious eyes turning toward me. Jenna emerged from the kitchen, her smile faltering slightly when she saw me. "Karina! What a surprise!" she exclaimed, quickly recovering. She hurried over and gave me an awkward hug, whispering, "You could have called first." "I should not have to call before coming to my own house," I whispered back. Jenna laughed loudly, turning to address her guests. "Everyone, this is my sister who is visiting from the city." She emphasized the word visiting in a way that made my stomach tighten. A tall man with a carefully trimmed beard approached us. "So you are the famous sister. Jenna has told us so much about you." I forced a smile. "Funny, she has not told me anything about any of you." An uncomfortable silence followed before Jenna jumped in. "Dave, could you refresh everyone's drinks? Karina and I need to catch up." She grabbed my arm and steered me toward the back bedroom, which had apparently become hers during her stay. Once the door closed behind us, her friendly demeanor vanished. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk about the changes you have made and set some boundaries," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But clearly, you are hosting another party." "It is just a few friends," Jenna said dismissively. "You are making a big deal out of nothing." "Nothing? You replaced Grandma's wallpaper without asking me. You are having parties, and you are telling people this is your house." Jenna's eyes filled with tears suddenly, catching me off guard. "You have no idea how hard things have been for me, Karina. My life fell apart. My marriage ended. I lost my job. I had nothing. I felt the familiar guilt creeping in, the same guilt that had made me offer her the cabin in the first place. I understand that, Jenna. That is why I let you stay here. But that does not give you the right to take over my property or lie about ownership." I was embarrassed, she admitted, wiping away tears. "Everyone our age owns their own place." I was tired of feeling like a failure, like I was just crashing at my successful sister's vacation home that she barely uses anyway. I sighed, feeling my resolve weaken. This was the pattern we had always fallen into, Jenna making a mistake, and then making me feel guilty for calling her on it. "Look," I said finally, "I understand you are going through a tough time, but there need to be clear boundaries. No more unauthorized changes to the house. No more parties without asking me first. And absolutely no more telling people this is your house." Jenna nodded contritely. "I am sorry. You are right. I got carried away." "You can stay another month while you find a job and your own apartment," I conceded. "But after that, you need to move out." "Thank you," she said, hugging me. "You are the best sister anyone could ask for. I promise things will be different." I returned to San Francisco the next morning, trying to convince myself that our conversation had resolved the issues. Jenna had seemed genuinely remorseful, and I wanted to believe her promises. 3 weeks later, I received a utility bill for the cabin that was triple the normal amount. Then came an email from the Homeowners Association about noise complaints. A week after that, a neighbor called to tell me about damage to the shared dock that would need to be repaired, with costs split between property owners. I called Jenna about each issue, and each time she had an excuse. The utility bill was because of unusually cold weather. The noise complaints were exaggerated by that grumpy old man next door. The dock damage was already there, or happened during a storm. Then came the revelation that truly stunned me. Tracy, the elderly woman who owned the cabin 2 doors down and had been friends with my grandmother, called one evening. "Karina, dear, I wanted to ask about your sister's rental arrangement," she began cautiously. "What rental arrangement?" I asked, confused. "Well, she has been renting out your spare bedroom to weekend visitors. A lovely young couple stayed there last weekend and mentioned they found it on a vacation rental website. They said they paid Jenna $800 for 3 nights. I felt physically ill. Tracy, I had no idea. Thank you for telling me." After hanging up, I immediately went online and found the listing. There was my cabin, advertised as a lakefront getaway, with rooms available for weekend rental. The profile picture showed Jenna smiling on my deck, described as your host. I was still reeling from this discovery when my mail arrived the next day, forwarded from the cabin address. Among the envelopes was an official-looking letter from the county business license department. I opened it to find a business license application confirmation for Lakeside Retreat LLC at my cabin's address, with Jenna listed as the business owner. She was not just living in my house. She was running a business out of it without my knowledge or permission. I called Tracy back to thank her for the information and to ask if she had noticed anything else unusual. Her hesitation was palpable. "Well, dear, there is one other thing. Your sister has been telling people that she inherited the cabin from your grandmother. She mentioned it at the community potluck last month, saying how grateful she was that your grandmother recognized how much the lake meant to her." The betrayal cut deep. Our grandmother had been closer to me, something that had always bothered Jenna. Now she was rewriting that history too, claiming a special relationship that had never existed and an inheritance that had never been hers. I hung up the phone and stared out my apartment window at the San Francisco skyline, feeling a resolve harden within me. This had gone far beyond family drama. Jenna was not just overstepping boundaries. She was actively trying to steal my property through a campaign of lies and manipulation. The time for understanding and second chances was over. I needed evidence, and I needed to protect what was rightfully mine. The security system had been installed after a break in at the cabin last winter. Nothing valuable had been stolen, just some food and blankets, suggesting it might have been someone looking for temporary shelter from the cold. Still, I had invested in a comprehensive system with interior and exterior cameras that uploaded footage to cloud storage. I had given Jenna the alarm code when she moved in, but had never mentioned the cameras. They were discreet, designed to blend with the cabin's rustic interior, and I had honestly forgotten about them until our confrontation over the wallpaper. Now, sitting in my San Francisco apartment, I logged into the security system's cloud storage. The interface showed months of archived footage. I started with the day Jenna had moved in and began scanning through. The first few weeks seemed innocent enough. Jenna settling in, exploring the house, making herself at home. But then came the first party, just 3 weeks after she arrived. I watched as she welcomed a group of 8 people, giving them a tour of her place. I turned up the volume to hear her clearly telling them, "My sister is letting me live here for a while, but honestly, this place should have been mine anyway." I continued through the footage, my heart sinking further with each new revelation. 2 months ago, Jenna had brought in a contractor to look at the wallpaper. The camera in the living room captured their conversation clearly. "My sister would never approve this change," Jenna told him, "but she will not be back for months. She will never know, and by then, it will be too late to change it back." "You sure you have authorization to make these changes?" the contractor asked. "Usually we need the owner's signature." Jenna laughed. "I am living here now, so I am basically the owner. Do not worry about my sister." I watched as Jenna systematically transformed my vacation home, removing family photos, rearranging furniture, and putting my personal belongings into storage boxes. In one particularly painful clip, she carefully took down the collection of seashells my grandmother and I had gathered over decades of lakeside summers and replaced them with store-bought decorative pieces. "These old shells are so tacky," she told a friend who was helping her. "Karina has always had terrible taste." The most alarming footage came from 3 weeks ago. Jenna welcomed a woman in a business suit into the cabin. The woman carried a portfolio and a camera. "As I mentioned on the phone, I am considering putting the property on the market," Jenna told her. "I want to know what kind of price we could get in the current market." "Well, lakefront properties in this area are very desirable," the woman replied, opening her portfolio. "Based on the square footage and the condition, I would list it around 1.2 million. Jenna's eyes widened. "That much?" "Absolutely. Do you have the deed and property documents available?" There was a moment's hesitation before Jenna responded. "My sister has those in the city. We will need to get them from her, but that should not be a problem." I felt physically ill. My sister was actively planning to sell my house, a house she did not own, a house that had been in our family for generations. The next morning, I called Amanda, a law school friend who specialized in real estate law. After explaining the situation, I asked, "What should I do?" "First, you need to formally evict her," Amanda advised. "Even though she does not have a lease, she has established residency by living there for months. Send a formal eviction notice giving her 30 days to vacate." "And what about the damage and the business she has been running?" "Document everything. The unauthorized changes, the business operation, the fraudulent representation of ownership. This goes beyond a civil matter, Karina. What she is doing could constitute fraud, which is a criminal offense." I was still processing this when my doorbell rang. A courier handed me a certified letter. The return address showed a law firm in Tahoe City. Inside was a formal letter stating that Jenna Wilson was asserting her claim to partial ownership of the Lake Tahoe property based on a verbal agreement of transfer allegedly made by our grandmother before her death. The letter demanded that I cease harassment and recognize Jenna's rightful claim to the property. I called Amanda immediately. She has hired a lawyer and is claiming Grandma promised her the cabin. "That is a common tactic," Amanda sighed. "Without written documentation in the will, such claims rarely succeed, but they can tie up the property in legal disputes for months or years. Karina, I hate to say this, but you need to treat this as a serious legal matter now, not just a family dispute." That night, I could not sleep. The betrayal was too enormous to process. Jenna and I had our differences over the years, but I never imagined she would go this far. I had offered her shelter when she needed it most, and in return she was trying to steal my inheritance. The next morning brought another shock. I received a call from my credit card company's fraud department. Someone had attempted to open a new credit line in my name, using my social security number and personal information. The address provided was my cabin in Lake Tahoe. "Did you authorize anyone to use your information?" the fraud representative asked. "No," I whispered, the full weight of Jenna's betrayal crushing me. "No, I did not." "We have flagged your accounts and placed a fraud alert on your credit report," the representative continued. "You should file a police report as soon as possible." I thanked her and hung up. then sat staring at the wall for what felt like hours. My sister had not only tried to steal my property but my identity as well. This was no longer about wallpaper or family disagreements or even boundary violations. This was calculated, criminal behavior. Amanda called later that day after reviewing the security footage I had sent her. "Karina, I know she is your sister, but what she is doing is serious," she said gently. "The footage of her discussing selling the property that she does not own constitutes attempted fraud. The identity theft attempt crosses into criminal territory. You need to protect yourself." "What do you recommend?" I asked, my voice hollow. "File for an emergency eviction based on the evidence you have. File a police report for the identity theft attempt, and prepare for this to get ugly." "She is my sister," I said weakly. "And she is trying to steal everything you have," Amanda replied firmly. "Family or not, you cannot let that happen." I hung up and looked around my apartment, suddenly feeling vulnerable. If Jenna had my social security number and personal information, what else might she try? How far would she go? The pain was overwhelming, but beneath it, something new was emerging. A determination to stand up for myself, to protect what was mine, to no longer be the understanding sister who always gave in to keep the peace. I picked up the phone and called my parents. It was time for a family intervention before this situation spiraled even further into legal chaos. My parents lived in a modest ranch-style home in Sacramento, about halfway between San Francisco and Lake Tahoe. They had retired there 5 years ago, downsizing from the suburban home where Jenna and I had grown up. I had always been closer to my father, while my mother tended to side with Jenna during our childhood conflicts. I arrived first, hugging my parents tightly in their driveway. Mom looked worried, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Dad seemed tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "Thank you for arranging this," I said as we walked inside. "We are family," Dad replied. "We solve problems as a family." Mom touched my arm gently. "Try to keep an open mind, Karina. Jenna has been through a lot with the divorce." I bit back a retort. Already, I could see my mother positioning herself as Jenna's defender. We settled in the living room, the walls adorned with family photos spanning decades. I noticed that in almost every picture, Jenna was front and center, smiling brilliantly, while I stood slightly to the side, my smile more reserved. The doorbell rang 30 minutes later. I steeled myself as Mom hurried to answer it. Jenna entered, followed by a tall man with salt and pepper hair I did not recognize. "Karina, Mom, Dad," Jenna said with forced cheerfulness, "this is Alan, my boyfriend." Alan shook hands with my parents, then extended his hand to me. I shook it reluctantly, noting his expensive watch and tailored clothes. "Alan is in real estate investment," Jenna added. "We met a few months ago." A real estate investor. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. We sat around the dining room table, an uncomfortable silence hanging in the air. Dad finally cleared his throat. "We need to discuss the situation at the cabin," he began. "Karina has some concerns about the arrangements there." Jenna immediately teared up. "I knew this was going to be an ambush. I am trying so hard to rebuild my life, and Karina wants to make me homeless again." "That is not true," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "I offered you temporary shelter when you needed it. In return, you have made unauthorized changes to my property, run a business out of it without permission, and misrepresented yourself as the owner." "Is that how you see it?" Jenna shot back. "I have improved your property. That wallpaper was falling apart. The furniture was outdated. I have increased your property value." "That is not your decision to make," I insisted. "It is my house." "A house you barely use," Jenna cried. "You visit maybe 4 weekends a year while I have been making it a home." Mom reached out to pat Jenna's hand. "Sweetheart, calm down. I am sure Karina appreciates the improvements. Right, Karina?" I stared at my mother in disbelief. "Mom," she replaced Grandma's wallpaper without asking. She moved my things into storage. "She has been charging people to stay there." "You have a successful career and an apartment in San Francisco," Mom replied. "Jenna is starting over with nothing. Cannot you find it in your heart to help your sister?" "I did help her," I said, my frustration mounting. I gave her a place to stay when she had nowhere else to go, but that does not give her the right to take over my property or attempt to sell it. The table went quiet. Dad looked sharply at Jenna. Sell it? What is Karina talking about? Jenna's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. That is ridiculous. I would never try to sell Karina's house. I pulled out my phone and played a clip from the security footage showing Jenna with the real estate agent discussing listing the property for sale. My parents watched in stunned silence. When the clip ended, Dad looked at Jenna with an expression I had rarely seen from him, disappointment mingled with anger. Jenna, explain this, he demanded. Jenna's tears flowed freely now. You do not understand. I was just exploring options. Alan suggested that lakefront properties are excellent investments, and I wanted to know what it might be worth. I was going to discuss it with Karina eventually. Alan shifted uncomfortably beside her. And what about renting out rooms to strangers? I asked. Or applying for a business license using my address? Or the credit card application in my name? Jenna's face crumpled. You always have everything handed to you, Karina. The good job, the nice apartment, the lake house. What do I have? A failed marriage and no prospects. Is it so wrong that I wanted something for myself for once? Not wrong to want something, Dad said quietly. Wrong to take what is not yours. The conversation continued for hours, cycling through accusations, tears, and tentative attempts at resolution. My parents, finally seeing the extent of Jenna's actions, tried to mediate a solution that would not involve courts or police. Maybe you could give her more time to find a place, Mom suggested, or work out some kind of co-ownership arrangement. After everything she has done? I asked incredulously. She has violated my trust repeatedly. She tried to steal my identity. How can I possibly trust her with co-ownership? As the afternoon wore on, it became clear that no resolution would be reached. Jenna alternated between tearful apologies and bitter accusations, while Alan remained mostly silent, occasionally whispering in her ear. Finally, Mom suggested we all stay for dinner, hoping that sharing a meal might ease tensions. I reluctantly agreed, helping her prepare the food while Dad took Alan out to see his workshop in the garage. Jenna cornered me in the kitchen while Mom went to set the table. You think you have won, bringing all this up in front of Mom and Dad, she hissed, her earlier tears completely gone. But you have no idea what I am capable of. If you force me out of that house, you will regret it. I stepped back, shocked by the venom in her voice. Are you threatening me? I am telling you that things can get much worse, she replied. Think carefully before you continue with this. At dinner, Jenna transformed again, playing the role of the misunderstood victim. She regaled our parents with stories of how she had saved the cabin from falling into disrepair, how she had created a thriving vacation rental business that could benefit the whole family. If Karina would just be reasonable, we could turn this into a real family asset, she concluded, smiling at Alan. Alan has connections with vacation property management companies. We could triple the income from the place. It is not about income, I said firmly. That cabin has been in our family for generations. It is not a business opportunity. It is our heritage. Heritage? Jenna scoffed. You sound just like Grandma, always living in the past instead of looking to the future. The evening deteriorated from there. As other family members who lived nearby dropped in after dinner, Jenna took the opportunity to paint herself as the victim of my unreasonable demands. Karina is trying to make me homeless, she told our cousin Sarah loud enough for everyone to hear. After everything I have done to help her with that old cabin, this is how she repays me. I watched in disbelief as family members who did not know the full story gave me disapproving looks. Jenna had always been the family favorite, the charming, outgoing sister who could do no wrong. By the time I left that night, I felt completely drained. The family intervention had backfired spectacularly. Instead of resolving the situation, it had given Jenna a platform to further manipulate and mislead. The next morning, I woke to discover that Jenna had taken her campaign public. She had posted a lengthy message on social media about family betrayal and being kicked out of my home by my own sister during difficult times. The post had dozens of sympathetic comments from friends and family members. Several mutual friends texted me, asking why I was being so cruel to my sister during her time of need. One childhood friend wrote, "I always thought you were the nice one, but this is really disappointing." The public humiliation stung deeply. Jenna had not only tried to take my property but was now attacking my reputation and relationships. I called Amanda. The family intervention failed. She is now publicly accusing me of trying to make her homeless and turning friends and family against me. "I warned you this might get ugly," Amanda replied gently. "Family disputes often do. But Karina, you have the evidence on your side. The security footage, the documentation of fraud attempts, the business license application. You need to decide if you are willing to use it." I thought of my grandmother, of her love for the cabin and all it represented. I thought of the decades of family memories stored within those walls. And I thought of Jenna's venomous whisper in the kitchen, "You have no idea what I am capable of." "I want to file for the emergency eviction," I said firmly, "and I want to file a police report about the identity theft attempt." "Are you sure?" Amanda asked. "This will permanently change your relationship with your sister." I thought of Jenna's manipulation, her lies, her betrayal of my trust. "I think that relationship has already changed," I said quietly. "Now I just need to protect myself and what belongs to me." As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm. The decision had been made. After years of giving in to Jenna's demands and manipulation, of being the understanding sister who always compromised to keep the peace, I was finally standing up for myself. The battle lines had been drawn, and for the first time in our relationship, I was prepared to fight. The Sacramento County Courthouse loomed imposingly against the clear blue sky. I smoothed down my charcoal gray skirt suit, a power outfit I normally reserved for important client presentations. Today, I needed all the confidence I could muster. Amanda met me at the entrance, her briefcase in hand. "Ready?" I nodded, though my stomach churned with anxiety. We were filing for an emergency eviction order based on the evidence I had gathered: security footage, documentation of unauthorized business activities, and the attempted identity theft. "Remember," Amanda said as we walked through security, "this is about protecting your legal rights. Try to separate the emotions from the actions." Easier said than done when the person you are taking legal action against is your own sister. The filing process was tediously formal, a stark contrast to the raw emotion driving it. I signed document after document, provided evidence, and gave a sworn statement. 3 hours later, we left with a court date set for the following week and an emergency temporary restraining order that would prevent Jenna from making any further changes to the property or representing herself as the owner. "The sheriff will serve her with the papers tomorrow," Amanda explained as we walked to our cars. "Be prepared for her reaction. It will not be pleasant." I nodded grimly. "I know." Our next stop was the police station, where I filed a formal report about the identity theft attempt. The officer who took my statement was professional but sympathetic. "Family fraud cases are among the most difficult," he told me. "The betrayal of trust adds another layer of harm." I left with a case number and the officer's assurance that they would investigate. The weight of what I had done settled heavily on my shoulders as I drove back to San Francisco. I had initiated legal proceedings against my own sister. There was no going back now. My phone began ringing incessantly that evening, first Jenna, then my parents, then various relatives and family friends. I let each call go to voicemail, not ready to defend my actions or absorb more guilt trips. Jenna's voicemail was chilling. "You have no idea what you have just started," she hissed. "If you think you can humiliate me like this and get away with it, you are wrong, dead wrong." My mother's message was tearful. "How could you involve the courts and police without telling us? This is a family matter, Karina. Your father and I are so disappointed." I turned off my phone and poured myself a glass of wine, hands shaking slightly. The isolation was palpable. It seemed that in standing up for myself, I had positioned myself against not just Jenna, but much of my family as well. The next morning, I took an emergency leave of absence from work. My boss was understanding. We had worked together for 7 years, and she knew I would not ask without good reason. "Take whatever time you need," she assured me. "Your projects are in good hands." With work temporarily handled, I drove to Lake Tahoe. I needed to assess the property damage firsthand and meet with local contractors to get estimates for repairs. As I pulled up to the cabin, I was startled to see an elderly woman standing on my front porch. It took me a moment to recognize Tracy, my grandmother's friend and neighbor. "Karina, dear," she called, waving. "I saw your car and wanted to check on you. Are you all right?" Her kindness brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Not really," I admitted, "but I am working on it." Tracy's weathered face creased with concern. "Come have tea. You look like you could use a friend." I followed her to her cabin, a similar A-frame structure with a slightly more weathered exterior. Inside it was cozy and filled with books. The view of the lake from her living room windows mirrored mine. Over tea and homemade cookies, I found myself telling Tracy everything, the words pouring out in a cathartic release. She listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or frowning. When I finished, she reached across the table and patted my hand. "Your grandmother would be proud of you for standing up for yourself. She was never one to let people walk all over her, and neither should you." "My family thinks I am being cruel," I said, voice breaking slightly. "Your family does not have all the facts," Tracy replied firmly. "I have watched what has been happening these past months. The parties, the strangers coming and going, the way your sister has been presenting herself as the owner. It is not right." Tracy proceeded to tell me about incidents I had not even known about, complaints from other neighbors about noise and property damage, Jenna's boasts about upgrading the old place, her plans to eventually modernize the entire cabin. "I have documentation of the noise complaints filed with the Homeowners Association," Tracy said, "and photographs of some of the damage to community property that occurred during her parties. I am happy to provide them for your court case if needed." I stared at her in surprise. "You would do that?" "Your grandmother was my dearest friend for over 40 years, Tracy said simply. "She wanted you to have this place because you treasured it the way she did. I will not stand by and watch it taken from you through deception." For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt like I had an ally, someone who understood what was at stake beyond the mere legal ownership of property. Back at my cabin, I began the painful process of documenting the changes and damages. The new wallpaper was just the beginning. Jenna had replaced fixtures, painted rooms without proper preparation, and even removed a load, bearing wall between the kitchen and dining area that would require professional reinforcement. As I photographed each alteration, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "This is Scott, Jenna's ex-husband. We need to talk." Cautious but curious, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop in town the next day. Scott arrived promptly, looking much as I remembered him from their wedding 5 years earlier, though with new lines of stress around his eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as we sat with our coffees. "I heard about what is happening with the cabin. Jenna has been telling people I left her destitute, but that is not the whole truth." Over the next hour, Scott revealed a pattern of behavior I had never known about. During their marriage, Jenna had opened credit cards in his name, borrowed money from his retirement account without permission, and tried to put her name on the deed to his pre-marital property. "I did not want to drag her name through the mud during the divorce," he explained. "I just wanted out. But when I heard she was pulling the same stunts with you, I felt I had to warn you." "Why did you not tell me this earlier?" I asked, feeling a mix of validation and frustration. "Would you have believed me?" he countered. "Jenna has always been good at making herself the victim and everyone else the villain. Plus, she is your sister. I figured your loyalty would be to her." He was right. I probably would not have believed him 6 months ago. I would have assumed he was bitter about the divorce and trying to turn me against my sister. Scott provided me with documentation of Jenna's financial misconduct during their marriage, including credit reports showing unauthorized accounts and police reports he had filed, but later dropped for the sake of moving on. "I am willing to testify if needed," he offered. "I should have held her accountable back then. Maybe if I had, she would not be doing this to you now." As word spread about the legal proceedings, more people came forward. 2 former friends of Jenna's contacted me with stories of borrowed money never repaid, possessions that mysteriously disappeared, and relationships manipulated for personal gain. A contractor who had worked on the wallpaper replacement reached out, uncomfortable with his role in the situation. She told me she was the owner, he explained. When I asked for documentation, she said her sister was just jealous of her inheritance and trying to cause trouble. I feel terrible now that I know the truth. With each new revelation, a picture emerged of a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond our current conflict. Jenna had been manipulating and taking advantage of people for years, using her charm and tears to evade consequences. The stress took a physical toll on me. I lost weight, developed insomnia, and found myself jumping at every unexpected noise or notification on my phone. The financial strain was significant as well, with legal fees, contractor estimates, and the cost of my unpaid leave from work rapidly depleting my savings. Despite this, I felt a growing resolve. This was not just about a house or wallpaper or even family dynamics. This was about standing up to someone who had built a life around taking advantage of others, who had never faced real consequences for her actions. The night before the court hearing, my phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. Last chance to drop this. If you go through with tomorrow, I will be homeless with nowhere to go. Is that what you want for your only sister? I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the familiar pull of guilt and obligation. Then I remembered the security footage of her planning to sell my house, Tracy's stories of the disrespect shown to our grandmother's memory, Scott's evidence of years of manipulation. I typed back a single sentence, "I will see you in court tomorrow." Then I turned off my phone, made a cup of tea, and stood by the window looking out at the lake. Tomorrow would change everything, for better or worse. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, with wood, paneled walls, and uncomfortable benches that seemed designed to heighten the tension of those waiting for their cases to be called. Amanda sat beside me, reviewing our documentation one last time. On the other side of the room, Jenna sat with her attorney, a sleek man in an expensive suit who kept checking his watch. My parents had arrived separately and sat in the back, their faces drawn with worry. They had not spoken directly to me since the family intervention failed, communicating only through brief, strained texts. I had spotted Alan entering behind them, taking a seat near the door as if preparing for a quick exit if needed. "All rise," the bailiff announced as the judge entered, a stern-looking woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She reminded me a little of my high school principal, the kind of person who could silence a room with a single glance. Our case was the third called. As Amanda and I approached the plaintiff's table, I caught Jenna's eye. There was no remorse there, only a cold determination that sent a chill down my spine. The judge reviewed our filing, looking over her glasses at the extensive documentation we had provided. "This is an unusual eviction case," she noted. "Miss Wilson, you are seeking to evict your sister from a property you own, is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "And Miss Jenna Wilson, you are contesting this eviction, on what grounds?" Jenna's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client has established residency in the property with the plaintiff's permission. Furthermore, she has made significant improvements to the property, increasing its value. We are counter, filing for compensation for those improvements and for additional time to relocate given the family nature of this situation." The judge raised an eyebrow. "I see. Miss Wilson Karina, please explain why you believe an emergency eviction is warranted rather than the standard 30-day notice." Amanda nodded encouragingly, and I took a deep breath. "Your Honor, what began as a temporary arrangement to help my sister through a difficult time has escalated into a situation where my property and identity are at risk. My sister has made unauthorized structural changes to the property, operated a business on the premises without permission, misrepresented herself as the owner, and attempted to use my personal information to open credit accounts." I presented the security footage showing Jenna discussing selling the property with a real estate agent, the business license application she had filed using my address, and the credit card fraud alert documentation. The judge watched the footage in silence, her expression unreadable. When it ended, she turned to Jenna's attorney. "Counselor, how do you respond to this evidence?" Jenna leaned over and whispered urgently to her attorney, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Your Honor, my client admits that some of her actions may have been overzealous. However, She maintains that there was a verbal understanding about her long-term residency in the property and her authority to make improvements. The judge looked skeptical. Do you have any evidence of this verbal agreement? Not at this time, Your Honor, but in that case, the judge interrupted, I am inclined to grant the emergency eviction based on the evidence of unauthorized business activities and attempted fraud. However, I will hear testimony from both parties before making my final decision. I was called to testify first, walking to the witness stand on legs that felt like jelly. After being sworn in, I described the arrangement I had made with Jenna, the discovery of the wallpaper and other changes, and the escalating pattern of boundary violations. And why did you install security cameras in the property? Jenna's attorney asked during cross-examination, his tone implying some nefarious purpose. They were installed after a break in last winter, before Jenna moved in, I explained. It is a vacation property that sits empty for long periods. The security system was for protection during those times. And you did not inform my client about these cameras? He pressed. I gave her the alarm code, but did not specifically mention the cameras. They are not hidden. They are standard security equipment mounted in plain view. When Jenna took the stand, she was the picture of wounded innocence. Her voice trembled as she described her divorce, her financial struggles, and my offer of the cabin as a fresh start. Karina told me to make myself at home, she claimed. She said I could stay as long as I needed and to treat the place as my own. When I mentioned the wallpaper was peeling, she said, "Do whatever you think is best." I took that as permission to update it. It was a blatant lie, but delivered with such conviction that I saw some in the courtroom, including my parents, nodding sympathetically. And the business license application? The judge asked directly. The vacation rentals you were operating? The meeting with a real estate agent to discuss selling a property you do not own? How do you explain those actions? Jenna's composure faltered slightly. I was exploring options for making the property more profitable for both of us. Karina barely uses the cabin. It seemed wasteful to let it sit empty when it could be generating income. Did you discuss these options with your sister, the legal owner, before implementing them? I tried to, but Karina is always so busy with her important job in the city, she never has time for family matters. I felt a flash of anger at the unfair characterization, but Amanda placed a warning hand on my arm, reminding me to maintain composure. The judge called for a brief recess before hearing from additional witnesses. In the hallway, my parents approached hesitantly. "This is horrible," Mom said, her eyes red, rimmed, seeing my daughters fight like this in public. "I did not want it to come to this," I replied quietly. But Jenna left me no choice. Dad looked tired beyond his years. The things Jenna said on the stand, they cannot all be true. They are not, I confirmed. But Jenna has always been convincing when she bends the truth. When court resumed, Tracy took the stand as a witness for my side, providing her observations of Jenna's behavior over the months and the documented complaints from the Homeowners Association. In the 40 years I knew their grandmother, Tracy concluded, she was explicit about wanting the cabin to remain in the family, preserved as a gathering place for generations to come. What I have witnessed is a systematic attempt to commercialize and eventually sell a family legacy. The most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source. Scott, Jenna's ex-husband, described in detail the pattern of financial manipulation he had experienced during their marriage. "This is not an isolated incident," he told the court. "This is a pattern of behavior that I personally experienced for 5 years. Unauthorized credit accounts, misrepresentation of ownership, manipulation of facts to gain sympathy and avoid consequences. These are strategies Jenna has refined over time." Jenna's face darkened with each word. When her attorney declined to cross-examine Scott, she whispered furiously to him, clearly unhappy with his decision. As the testimony concluded, the judge reviewed her notes carefully before looking up. "Based on the evidence presented, I am granting the emergency eviction order, Miss. Jenna Wilson must vacate the property within 48 hours. Furthermore, I am issuing a restraining order prohibiting her from entering the property or contacting the plaintiff directly for a period of 90 days. She turned to Jenna directly. "Miss Wilson, The evidence suggests a pattern of behavior that extends beyond a simple family disagreement about property use. I am referring the documentation regarding the identity theft attempt and fraudulent business operations to the District Attorney's Office for review. They will determine if criminal charges are warranted. Jenna's face contorted with rage. This is ridiculous. She is my sister. That cabin should have been mine anyway. Our grandmother always loved me more. Miss Wilson, the judge warned, control yourself or you will be held in contempt. But Jenna was beyond warnings. She turned to face me directly, pointing an accusatory finger. You have always been jealous of me, always trying to make me look bad. You offered me that cabin because you knew I had nowhere else to go, and now you are throwing me out on the street. What kind of sister does that? The kind who has finally had enough of being taken advantage of, I replied quietly, my voice somehow carrying in the suddenly silent courtroom. Jenna lunged toward me, only to be intercepted by the bailiff. You will regret this. I will make sure everyone knows what you have done. Nobody will ever trust you again. As she was escorted from the courtroom, still shouting threats and accusations, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that the legal battle had been decided in my favor. Sadness at the public disintegration of what remained of our sisterly relationship, and an unexpected sense of liberation, as if a burden I had carried for years had finally been lifted. My parents approached as we gathered our documents, their expressions conflicted. We had no idea how far things had gone, Dad said, his voice rough with emotion. Why did you not tell us about the credit card fraud and the attempt to sell the cabin? Would you have believed me? I asked simply. Jenna has always been the one you defended, even when the evidence was right in front of you. Mom flinched at the truth in my words. We just wanted to believe the best of both our daughters. I understand, I said, and I did. It was easier to believe in misunderstandings and exaggerations than to accept that your child was capable of calculated deception and fraud. As we left the courthouse, a police officer approached. Miss Wilson? I am Detective Harris from the Financial Crimes Unit. We would like to ask you some questions about the identity theft attempt mentioned in today's proceedings. Amanda stepped in. My client is happy to cooperate, but we would like to schedule an interview for tomorrow. Today has been extremely difficult. The detective nodded understanding and handed me his card. Call my office in the morning. And Miss Wilson? Based on what I heard today, this may be just the tip of the iceberg. Identity theft between family members often goes deeper than initially discovered. I drove back to the cabin alone, emotionally exhausted but resolute. The legal battle had been won, but I knew the war was far from over. Jenna's parting threats still rang in my ears. She would not accept this defeat quietly. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the front door standing slightly ajar. With a sense of dread, I pushed it open and stepped inside. The interior had been ransacked, furniture overturned, remaining family photos smashed, walls defaced with angry scrawls of thief and traitor. In the center of the living room floor lay the shredded remains of the quilt my grandmother had made, the one that had somehow survived Jenna's redecorating purge. I sank to my knees beside it, fingers tracing the tattered edges of fabric that had been lovingly stitched together decades ago. In that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of both my property and my family relationships, I finally allowed myself to break down completely. The tears came in heaving sobs that left me gasping for breath. I cried for the grandmother who had loved this place, for the sister I had tried so hard to help, for the family that would never be the same, and finally, for myself, and the guilt I had carried for simply trying to protect what was mine. When the storm of emotion finally passed, I rose to my feet, wiping away the last of my tears. The cabin could be repaired. The material possessions could be replaced. What could never be restored was my relationship with Jenna. That had been broken beyond repair, not by today's court decision, but by years of manipulation and betrayal that had finally been exposed to the light. As painful as this breaking point was, it also represented a new beginning. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had stood firm in my own defense, refusing to be manipulated by guilt or family obligation into accepting mistreatment. I began to clean up the mess, one piece at a time, just as I would need to rebuild my life, one day at a time. Spring came to Lake Tahoe in a gentle progression of melting snow, emerging wildflowers, and increasingly warm sunlight dancing across the water. 6 months had passed since the courtroom confrontation. 6 months of healing and rebuilding, both for the cabin and for my sense of self. I stood on the newly refinished deck, coffee mug warming my hands in the crisp morning air. The cabin behind me looked both familiar and new, a careful balance of preservation and necessary change. The extensive damage Jenna had left in her final rage had required significant repairs, providing an unexpected opportunity to reconsider what I truly wanted this space to be. "Good morning," called a friendly voice. Tracy waved from her own deck next door, a daily ritual we had established in recent months. Her support had been unwavering throughout the aftermath of the legal proceedings. "Beautiful day," I called back. "Coffee in an hour?" She gave a thumbs up and disappeared back inside. Our friendship had deepened into something that reminded me of what I had shared with my grandmother, a connection that bridged generations and offered wisdom without judgment. The aftermath of the court case had been difficult in ways I had not anticipated. Jenna had indeed followed through on her threats to damage my reputation, creating a narrative of sibling betrayal that divided friends and extended family. Some believed her version of events, where I was the heartless sister who had thrown her out with nowhere to go. Others, particularly those who had witnessed her pattern of behavior firsthand, stood firmly by my side. My parents had struggled the most, torn between their 2 daughters. Initially, they had tried to maintain relationships with both of us, but Jenna had ultimately forced them to choose sides, cutting them off when they refused to denounce me completely. Our relationship was still healing, complex conversations happening in careful increments as they came to terms with the daughter they had not truly known. Inside the cabin, the main living area had been completely transformed. After much reflection, I had found a wallpaper artisan who created a custom design incorporating elements of my grandmother's beloved forget-me, not pattern, but updated in a way that felt fresh and personal. One accent wall featured the exact replica of the original wallpaper, a testament to what had been, while the other walls carried the new design forward, a perfect metaphor for my journey. The legal consequences for Jenna had been significant. The district attorney had pursued charges for attempted fraud and identity theft, resulting in a plea deal that included probation, mandatory financial counseling, and restitution payments. She had managed to avoid jail time, something I was privately relieved about despite everything she had done. My phone rang, displaying my lawyer's number. "Good morning, Amanda. Just got confirmation that the last of the restitution payment was processed," she reported. "That closes the financial aspect of the case officially. Thank you for everything," I said sincerely. "I could not have navigated any of this without you." "You did the hard part," she replied. "Standing up for yourself is never easy, especially against family. How are you feeling about everything now that it is officially resolved?" I considered the question carefully, lighter, like I have set down a burden I did not even realize I was carrying all these years. After we hung up, I wandered through the cabin, taking inventory of all that had changed. The structural damage from Jenna's removal of the load-bearing wall had been properly repaired. The furniture was a thoughtful mix of restored family pieces and new items chosen specifically for comfort and durability. Most importantly, I had reclaimed the space emotionally, filling it with new memories to accompany the treasured old ones. Some family heirlooms had been permanently lost in Jenna's final destructive act. My grandmother's quilt had been damaged beyond repair, though I had preserved one intact square in a shadow box that now hung in the entryway. The collection of seashells had never been recovered, but other treasures had survived or been restored, reminders that while some things are irreplaceable, resilience often reveals unexpected strength. Tracy arrived precisely on time, bearing a basket of freshly baked muffins. We settled in the sunroom I had added during the renovations, a bright space with comfortable chairs and an unobstructed view of the lake. "I have news," she announced, pouring her coffee. "Jenna was seen in town yesterday." My hand stilled momentarily. The restraining order had expired months ago, but Jenna had remained conspicuously absent from the Lake Tahoe area until now. "She looked different," Tracy continued carefully. "More subdued. She was with a counselor from that financial rehabilitation program the court mandated. Did she say anything about me or the cabin? Tracy shook her head. They just had lunch at the diner and left. But it seemed significant, her coming back here at all. I nodded, absorbing this information. The anger and hurt that had once consumed me at the mention of Jenna's name had gradually transformed into something more complex, a sad understanding of a person whose insecurities and entitlement had driven her to betray those closest to her. Later that afternoon, my parents arrived for their weekend visit, a new tradition we had established as part of our healing process. Mom carried a small box that she handed to me with uncharacteristic shyness. "We found this in the attic," she explained as I opened it to reveal a set of faded photographs, pictures of you and Jenna here at the cabin when you were little, before the competition between you started. The images showed two smiling girls building sandcastles at the lakeshore, riding in a paddle boat, roasting marshmallows by a campfire. Two sisters who had once simply enjoyed each other's company, before adult complications and resentments had crept in. "Thank you," I said softly, recognizing the peace offering for what it was. "I will find frames for these." Dad cleared his throat. "We saw Jenna last week. She is doing that financial counseling program, living in a halfway house in Sacramento. She seems humbled, perhaps. Asked about you." "What did you tell her?" I asked, curious rather than anxious. "That you were rebuilding, both the cabin and yourself. That you seem stronger than we have ever seen you." We spent the evening on the deck, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in months, touching on family memories, current events, and cautious plans for future gatherings. Not once did anyone suggest that I should have handled things differently, a silent acknowledgement that my boundaries had finally been recognized and respected. The next morning, I took a long walk along the lakeshore, my thoughts turning to the life lessons extracted from the painful experience. I had learned the hard way that true generosity comes with boundaries, that helping others should never require sacrificing your own well-being, and that standing up for yourself is not selfish but necessary. Most importantly, I had discovered my own strength. The Karina who had once given in to Jenna's demands to keep the peace no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who understood her own worth and was no longer willing to be manipulated by guilt or obligation. When I returned to the cabin, I found an envelope that had been slipped under the door. My name was written on it in Jenna's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a brief note. "I know words cannot undo what happened. I am getting help to understand why I did what I did. I do not expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I recognize the harm I caused. Jenna." No apology, not exactly, but an acknowledgement, which was more than I had ever received from her before. I folded the note carefully and placed it in a drawer. Perhaps someday it might represent the first step towards some new understanding between us, though never again the blind trust I had once given so freely. Over the next few weeks, I finalized the new security measures for the property, including updated cameras, smart locks, and legal protections that would prevent anyone from claiming residency without proper documentation. These were practical precautions, not driven by fear but by wisdom gained through experience. I also established a proper rental agreement for the occasional weeks when I did share the cabin with extended family, clear terms outlining expectations and responsibilities. Some relatives were offended by the formality, but others understood that clarity prevents misunderstandings and protects relationships rather than damaging them. As summer approached, I hosted a small gathering to officially reopen the cabin. Close friends, supportive family members, Tracy and other neighbors all came together to celebrate not just the renovated space, but the personal transformation it represented. Standing in the center of the living room, surrounded by people who had stood by me through the darkest days, I raised a toast. To homes that shelter us, to boundaries that protect us, and to the courage to defend both when necessary. Later, as the party wound down, I found myself alone on the deck with Dad. "You know," he said quietly, "your grandmother would be proud of how you handled all this. She always said you had a quiet strength that people underestimated." "I underestimated it myself," I admitted. "I always thought standing up for myself would cost me the relationships I valued. I never realized that relationships without mutual respect were already broken. The sun was setting over the lake, casting long shadows across the water. In that peaceful moment, I felt a sense of completion, of having come through a storm to find not just shelter but a deeper understanding of myself and what I was capable of weathering. The cabin would always bear some scars from what had happened, subtle marks visible only to those who knew where to look. But, like me, it had emerged from the ordeal stronger, its foundation more secure, its boundaries more clearly defined. Some might see what happened with Jenna as a story of family tragedy, of bonds broken beyond repair, but I had come to view it differently. It was a story of necessary endings that make way for healthier beginnings, of learning that sometimes love means setting limits rather than endlessly giving, and of discovering that true strength often emerges only when we are pushed to our breaking point. As the final guests departed with warm hugs and promises to return soon, I stood alone in my reclaimed space, feeling a profound sense of peace. The journey had been painful, but the destination, this new version of myself who understood her own worth and was no longer afraid to defend it, was worth every difficult step. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you care about? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find strength in knowing they are not alone in facing family conflicts. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to protect what matters most to you, even when it is difficult.